The doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a groaning weight, as if the building itself disliked letting her inside. Nora Marcus adjusted the collar of her dark jacket, keeping her face calm even as the pulse in her throat betrayed her nerves. Her boots echoed against the crystal floor, each step sounding too loud in the silence. Above her, the ceiling shimmered with projected starlight, showing the living swirl of the Andorra Nebula. The light shifted purple and blue across the walls and faces of the dozens of alien representatives waiting for her. Nora had been in this chamber before, but never with the air this heavy. Conversations were hushed. Even the species who normally filled the room with noise had fallen into uneasy quiet. The crystalline Zephyrians had dimmed their natural glow to a sickly gray, while the feathered Avarians sat with wings tucked tight, refusing to meet each other's eyes. Across the chamber, the coiled Oidians pulsed with dark red patches that signaled their stress. Something had them rattled, and it wasn't the usual posturing that happened before a debate. Her assigned seat was waiting near the circular council table, one of the few chairs built to human measurements. 3 years ago, when Earth joined this coalition of ancient powers, they had been treated like children invited to the adults' table. The council had tolerated their presence with thin smiles, never asking for much, never expecting much either. Nora had grown used to the condescension. She had learned to bite her tongue when alien delegates laughed at her proposals or called humanity a young species barely out of its cradle. But today the room was different. No one was laughing. Elder Theran, a council member whose cracked stone-like skin looked like it had survived centuries of wars, leaned forward and fixed his gaze on her. His voice rolled like gravel across the chamber. "Ambassador Marcus. Thank you for arriving so quickly." Nora gave a polite nod. "Earth answers when called, Elder. Whatever the council needs, I am here to listen." That got a ripple of amusement from a few corners of the chamber, though it carried no warmth. The council rarely took Earth's military offers seriously. The galaxy saw humans as volunteers at best, cannon fodder at worst. They were tolerated because they were earnest, not because they were useful. Speaker Vera, a diplomat with skin that flowed like water and tentacles that moved with anxious rhythm, leaned forward next. "The situation has become critical. The Dominion has broken through our outer defenses. They have already burned 3 of our trade worlds. Their fleets are advancing toward the core systems at a speed we cannot stop." A hush settled. The word Dominion carried weight even here, among species who had fought 1,000 wars. It was a coalition of 6 warlike races, each cruel enough on its own, but together nearly unstoppable. Nora had seen intelligence reports before she left Earth, but hearing it said aloud, in this chamber filled with people who were supposed to embody galactic stability, made her stomach knot tighter. "How bad?" Nora asked carefully, though she already suspected the answer. War Chief Arvek of the Avarians ruffled his golden feathers, a gesture that to his people was the equivalent of dropping one's weapon in resignation. "We have lost over 60 ships this week. Their dreadnoughts carry quantum weapons that tear through shields like paper. Our fleets are bleeding out. We are outmatched." A holographic map flickered above the table, showing red Dominion markers spreading across the galaxy like an infection. Blue Council worlds blinked one by one as they were evacuated or destroyed. The pace of their collapse was shocking. "The Harmony Station will fall in less than 48 hours, Theran continued, his deep-set eyes narrowing. "At this rate they will reach the core within a month." Murmurs swept through the chamber. Some delegates demanded harsher measures, others whispered of evacuation. Nora kept her eyes on the map. To them it looked hopeless. To her, it looked like a clock winding down to something humanity had been preparing for all along. "What does the council intend?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Speaker Vera's tentacles slowed. "We have exhausted every option. Diplomacy, sanctions, direct engagement. Nothing has worked, which is why we turn now to all member species. Even Earth." The word stung, but Nora smiled faintly. "What kind of assistance are you asking for?" Arvek's feathers twitched again. "A few frigates. Support ships, perhaps. We know Earth lacks heavy warships. Still, every contribution counts." Nora almost laughed, though she hid it behind the practiced mask of diplomacy. If only they knew. Humanity had never been helpless. It had simply been careful. For years, her government had allowed the galaxy to underestimate them, to think of them as a harmless curiosity. Behind the curtain, though, things were very different. "I will need to consult with Earth's leadership before committing," Nora said, her tone neutral. "This is a decision too large for one voice." "How long will that take?" Elder Theran pressed. 72 hours. The chamber buzzed with anxious murmurs again. For them, 72 hours might already be too late. For Nora, 72 hours was exactly what humanity needed. The meeting dragged on, filled with evacuation strategies and diplomatic dead ends. Nora listened, asked polite questions and scribbled meaningless notes. But her mind wasn't on the debate. It was on the secure communicator in her pocket, waiting for the moment she could send one message home. When the session ended, most of the delegates filed out with expressions of grim acceptance. Elder Thuran lingered, his stone-like hand resting on the table. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "your people have been here 3 years. I have lived through 4 galactic wars. I can tell when a civilization hides its teeth. Humanity has been very careful to keep its mouth shut. Too careful." Nora met his stare, her expression calm, though her pulse quickened. "Elder, Earth has been transparent in every dealing with this council." His gaze didn't waver. "Perhaps. But I suspect the next 72 hours will show us truths that no words could hide." Then he left her standing alone in the vast chamber. For a long moment, Nora stayed there, staring at the holographic map where red markers consumed the galaxy. Then she slipped her hand into her jacket and activated her communicator. A coded pulse of light ran across the device, carrying 3 words across secure human channels. "The time comes." Somewhere deep in the asteroid belt, Admiral Nathaniel Brooks would receive her signal. Engineers in hidden shipyards would begin final checks. Crews who had trained in silence for years would rush to their stations. The galaxy thought humans were a child at the table. In 72 hours, they would see exactly what kind of child Earth had raised. The asteroid belt had always been a graveyard, a place of rocks drifting in silence, orbiting the sun with no purpose but to collide and shatter. That was what the Council believed. To their sensors, this sector was nothing but debris and emptiness. Admiral Nathaniel Brooks knew better. He stood on the command deck of Ghost Base, hidden deep within the labyrinth of 3 massive asteroids. The view beyond the reinforced glass was breathtaking and terrifying all at once. The shadows of the rocks hid a fleet that should not exist. 200 ships floated in silence, dormant engines gleaming faintly in reflected starlight. Frigates, carriers, cruisers, ships with shapes that shifted slightly even at rest. They had been built in secrecy, every hull forged from stolen years and whispered budgets, every weapon tested in simulations no one outside Earth had ever seen. To the galaxy they were myths at best. To Brooks they were the product of half his life. "Status?" Brooks asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a man who had waited too long for this moment. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park, sharp-eyed and restless, tapped her console. "All ships reporting ready, sir. Final systems checks complete. Weapons live, stealth net stable. Crews are standing by." Brooks nodded, his gaze fixed on the flagship resting at the heart of the fleet. The UEV Phantom. Sleek, obsidian black, designed to adapt its shape mid-battle. Right now it looked like a spear waiting to be thrown, but in a fight it could morph into a hammer, a shield, or something the enemy had no name for. Brooks let out a slow breath. 15 years ago, he had been a captain with more ambition than influence. When Earth first made contact with the Council, most of his peers had wanted to play along, to show humility, to prove that humanity could fit in with the grown-ups. Brooks had seen something else. An opportunity. Let them underestimate us. Let them think we are harmless. Let them believe Earth has nothing to offer. All the while we build this. The Ghost Fleet. "Communications from Earth," Park said, turning in her chair. "Ambassador Marcus has sent the activation code." Brooks felt the air tighten. His heartbeat quickened, though his face stayed impassive. The code meant the time for shadows was over. "Patch me through to all commanders," he ordered. One by one, faces filled the main screen. Captains, admirals, commanders, some gray-haired and grizzled, others barely into their 30s but hardened by years of secret training. Among them, Brooks spotted Captain Sarah O'Connell of the Storm Fleet, Commander Jean Takeda of the Phantom Fleet, and Admiral Rodriguez of the Titan Fleet. Each of them had been waiting for this moment as long as he had. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brooks began, his voice steady, "the Council has finally asked for our help. The Dominion is burning worlds, and they think humanity will send a handful of frigates to die buying time. That illusion ends today." There was no cheering, no dramatic music. Just silence, broken by the quiet breaths of commanders who understood the weight of what was about to happen. "The Dominion fights wars the same way they've always fought them," Brooks continued. "Big ships, heavy armor, straight lines, predictable moves. They think power comes from size. They're about to learn that humanity doesn't play by those rules." On one of the feeds, Captain O'Connell smirked. About damn time we get to try out the weather toys. I was starting to think we'd spend a decade building expensive lightning machines for nothing. Better hope they work, Rodriguez muttered, though the edge in her voice sounded more like anticipation than doubt. Brooks allowed himself a dry smile. They'll work. And if they don't, you'll improvise. That's what we do best. He tapped a control on the console and a tactical map lit up, showing the Kepler system under siege. Red markers filled the display. Dominion dreadnoughts surrounded the colony world, their weapons tearing through Council defenses like knives through cloth. Our first strike is Kepler, Brooks said, his tone hardening. The Dominion is hitting evacuation ships as we speak. We intercept, we hit them where they least expect it, and we show the galaxy that humans aren't prey. We're the wolves they've been feeding without noticing. Silence again, but this time it carried weight. Every commander on the screen knew what was at stake. Once they revealed themselves, there would be no going back. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. Remember, Brooks said, leaning closer, our advantage is surprise. They don't know we exist. Every shot, every maneuver counts. Make them doubt. Make them fear. And when the dust clears, make them remember the day they met humanity. He gave the order without hesitation. Signal the fleet. Power up engines. Prepare for jump. Engines that had slept for years roared awake, their lights spilling across the asteroid shadows. The stealth net flickered, no longer hiding but reshaping, bending light around the fleet until the ships seemed to melt from view even as they moved. Lieutenant Park checked her console again. All systems green. Fleet is ready to deploy. Brooks straightened, his hands tightening behind his back. He had imagined this moment for years, but nothing prepared him for the sight of the ghost fleet stretching out before him, like a giant waking from slumber. Navigation, he said. Set course for Kepler. Maximum burn. The jump drives began to hum, the low vibration filling the station like a pulse. Brooks kept his eyes fixed on the map. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was tearing apart civilians who had once welcomed human traders with open arms. That thought burned hotter than any star. All ships, Brooks announced to the fleet, his voice carrying across secure channels. This is Admiral Nathaniel Brooks with Operation Revelation, Authorization Alpha 7. We move to engage. Let's show them what humanity really is. The stars outside stretched into white lines as the ghost fleet leapt into the void, heading toward its first war. The Iron Fist cut through space like a predator. Its hull was a slab of black metal scarred from dozens of victories, its cannons glowing as they spat fire into the last of Kepler's defenses. On the bridge, Captain Drevik of the Dominion leaned forward in his command chair, his eyes reflecting the light of exploding ships. The air smelled faintly of ozone and scorched circuitry, the way it always did after extended bombardment. Status? He asked. Council fleet is broken, sir, replied his weapons officer, a broad-shouldered reptilian whose grin showed rows of needle teeth. The orbital platforms are gone. Evacuation ships are scattering. Should I target them? Drevik's lips curled into a thin smile. Of course. Fear spreads faster when you burn the survivors. Make sure they understand there is no escape from the Dominion. The weapons officer's claws danced across the console. Quantum torpedoes armed. Ready to fire. The Dominion had done this 100 times. Worlds resisted, fleets stood in their way, and the Dominion crushed them all. Their doctrine was simple. Overwhelm with force, erase opposition, remind the galaxy that resistance was pointless. But before the officer could fire, a strange ripple appeared on the sensors. Captain, the sensor chief said, frowning at her console, I'm picking up anomalies across the system. Gravitational distortions. Multiple sources. Drevik turned his head slowly. Council weapons? No, sir. The Council ships are in retreat. Whatever this is, it's not them. The deck trembled, faintly at first, then stronger, as if space itself was shivering. Drevik stood, his eyes narrowing. Report. Unknown signatures, sir. There, the officer's voice faltered. They're appearing inside our formation. Space tore open. One moment there was emptiness, the next there was a ship. Sleek, black, sharp-edged, its hull shifting like liquid under starlight. It appeared barely 3 kilometers from the Iron Fist, too close for comfort, too close for safety. Before Drevik could shout an order, the vessel fired. Not energy beams. Not torpedoes. Streams of metallic projectiles that shimmered strangely, as if each one existed in more than one moment at once. The Dominion's shields flared, and failed. The rounds passed through, ripping into the Iron Fist's armor with bone-shaking force. Shields are compromised, shouted the defense officer. They're phasing through the matrix. More ships appeared. Dozens. Then hundreds. They erupted into existence like ghosts materializing from another reality, each one different from the last. Long spear-like frigates. Compact brawlers bristling with weapons. Vessels whose shapes morphed as Drevik watched, shifting configurations mid-flight. What the hell are they? Drevik snarled. The sensor chief's hands shook. Not in any database. Not council. Their signatures are human. The word landed like a blow. Humans. The species the Dominion had barely noticed, the ones the council treated like children. A species with trade ships and outdated frigates. A species that should not have had the power to breach a Dominion fleet. Yet here they were. A new ship flashed into existence just off the Iron Fist's port side. Its hull flowed like molten steel, shifting shape as if deciding what weapon it wanted to be. Then it opened fire with a barrage that tore through a Dominion destroyer, splitting it apart in less than a minute. "Sir," another officer shouted, panic edging into his voice. "We're detecting atmospheric storms inside the system. Electromagnetic surges are disrupting comms. It's impossible. Weather in space." On the main display, lightning arced between ships, real lightning in the vacuum, leaping across Dominion hulls and frying their systems. Their formations faltered. Ships spun out of control, comms collapsing into static. "Maintain order." Drevik roared. "Regroup and return fire." But how could they return fire against enemies that didn't obey the rules? Ships blinked in and out of existence, firing salvos from some other dimension before vanishing again. Others reconfigured mid-combat, switching from long-range artillery to close-range assault before Dominion gunners could recalibrate. The Dominion was an army built on predictability, on overwhelming strength and fear. They were now facing an enemy that fought like chaos itself. On the bridge, alarms screamed. "We've lost the Bloodfang and Harbinger. Multiple cruisers disabled. Their casualties are minimal." "Minimal, sir." Drevik's jaw tightened. In over 40 campaigns he had never felt this. Not defeat. Something worse. Uncertainty. He leaned toward the display, staring at the human ships as if sheer will could explain them. "Find me their command ship." The sensor chief's voice shook. "One vessel stands out, sir. Designation unknown. It keeps reconfiguring. Currently locked on us." On the screen, the black vessel pivoted. Its hull rippled, reshaping into a form bristling with short-range weapons. The Iron Fist shield screamed under the assault, sparks showering the bridge. "Return fire." Drevik bellowed. But even as the Dominion dreadnought fired, the human ship twisted again, altering its structure, sliding into another configuration. Dominion gunners missed. Their targeting computers scrambled to keep up, but the enemy never stayed the same long enough to hit. In that moment, Drevik understood the truth. The Dominion had always believed war was about bigger ships, stronger weapons, harder armor. Humanity had rewritten the rules in an instant. And the Dominion was losing. The battle raged, but somewhere inside the chaos, one thought began gnawing at Drevik's mind. If this was humanity's opening move, what else were they hiding? The Kepler system was chaos. Dominion ships, once a wall of firepower and discipline, scattered like startled prey. Their dreadnoughts fired wildly into the void, missing more often than hitting. The Council's crippled defense fleet drifted uselessly at the system's edge, their surviving crews staring at the impossible spectacle unfolding before their eyes. Humanity had arrived. Admiral Nathaniel Brooks stood at the center of the Phantom's command deck, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, consoles hummed with data, voices snapping reports. On the forward screen, Dominion ships burned one after another, torn apart by weapons they couldn't even comprehend. "Status of the Storm Fleet?" Brooks asked without looking away from the display. Captain Sarah O'Connell's voice came over comms, dry as ever. "Currently making God angry, Admiral. Lightnings everywhere. Half their fleet can't talk to the other half, and the ones who can talk are screaming at each other." A smirk tugged at the corner of Brooks' mouth. The Storm Fleet's technology had always been controversial even within Earth's military. Manipulating quantum fields to simulate weather in the vacuum of space sounded insane. Yet now arcs of white-hot lightning lanced across the system, jumping from Dominion hull to Dominion hull, frying circuits, crippling engines. "Remind me," O'Connell added, "to bill the Council for the power grid we're frying. This storm puts half their colonies to shame." Brooks let the humor sit, then cut back to business. "Good work. Keep their formations broken. I want them isolated." "Yes, sir." "And Admiral?" "Yes." "Feels good to stop pretending." Brooks allowed himself a brief, tight smile. Enjoy it while it lasts, Captain. The element of surprise only works once. On the opposite flank, the Phantom fleet flickered into existence, its ships shimmering as though reality itself struggled to hold them. Commander Jean Takeda's flagship, the Wraith, emerged halfway through a Dominion cruiser, fired a full spread of phase torpedoes, then vanished again before the Dominion crew could scream. The torpedoes reappeared inside the cruiser's shield bubble, detonating with surgical precision. Takeda's voice came over comms, clipped and efficient. Target neutralized. Moving to the next. Understood, Brooks replied. Maintain unpredictability. The longer they can't lock on, the more we own this fight. The Phantom fleet was the Council's worst nightmare made flesh. Dimensional phasing had been considered theoretical at best, madness at worst. Humanity had made it practical, lethal and silent. The Dominion fired blindly into empty space, trying to hit shadows that weren't there. A cheer rose from one of the consoles as another Dominion destroyer went dark. Brooks ignored it. His eyes were fixed on the tactical map. Admiral, Lieutenant Park said, her voice tight with awe, the Titan fleet has arrived. Brooks didn't move, but the bridge went silent as a new icon appeared on the map. A massive one. Out on the edge of the system, a shadow eclipsed the stars. The Atlas slid into real space, its colossal bulk dwarfing even the Dominion's dreadnoughts. The ship was a moving city, a floating fortress, a weapon so enormous that no one in the galaxy could have imagined it being built in secret. The Atlas powered its weapons, and every Dominion officer who saw the energy spikes on their sensors knew instinctively that whatever came next would not be survivable. On the Iron Fist's bridge, Captain Drevik felt his chest tighten. He had faced fleets. He had burned colonies. He had seen weapons that split moons in half. But this was something else. The human ship loomed like a mountain given engines, its hull bristling with weaponry that made no sense to Dominion eyes. By the abyss, one of his officers whispered. It's larger than our stations. Drevik didn't answer. His throat was dry. Back on the Phantom, Brooks gave the order calmly. Titan fleet engage. The Atlas fired. The blast wasn't a single beam or volley. It was a storm of adaptive ordnance, swarms of shifting projectiles that split, recombined, and redirected mid-flight. They bypassed shields, confused targeting systems, and carved through Dominion dreadnoughts like they were practice targets. Ships that had ruled battlefields for decades simply disintegrated under the assault. On every Council vessel still alive, crews stared in open-mouthed shock. The aliens who had mocked humanity's primitive ways now watched them dismantle the most feared war machine in the galaxy with frightening ease. On the Dominion side, panic spread like fire. They're broadcasting, a comms officer reported on Drevik's bridge, her voice breaking. Drevik snapped his head around. Broadcasting what? All channels, sir. Open frequencies. They're reporting our losses. Ship names. Casualty numbers. Tactical breakdowns. To everyone. Council channels. Civilian networks. Dominion space. Everyone can hear it. It wasn't just an attack. It was psychological warfare. Humanity wasn't just destroying ships. They were destroying belief. For the first time in his long career, Captain Drevik felt fear. He slammed his fist against the console. Order the retreat. Rally point 7. Now. The Dominion fleet tried to flee. Engines flared, formations broke, survivors scattered. But humanity had planned for that too. Waiting on the retreat vector, concealed until now, another human fleet emerged. Titan ships, smaller than the Atlas but still enormous, moved to block the escape routes. And at their center, the Atlas repositioned, cutting off Drevik's dreadnought with a cold inevitability. The Dominion had walked into a trap. Humanity had been waiting for this moment. Brooks watched the tactical map, his voice steady. All fleets maintain pressure. No mercy until they break. And they were breaking. The Dominion, an alliance that had conquered worlds without hesitation, that had terrified the galaxy into submission, was shattering in the face of a species they had dismissed as irrelevant. For humanity, the mask was gone. For the galaxy, everything had just changed. The council chamber had never been this loud. Nora Marcus stood at her seat, watching as 43 alien delegations erupted in disbelief. Voices overlapped, translator devices stuttered to keep up, and the great crystal dome above seemed to tremble with the noise. The holographic display at the center of the chamber didn't help. It showed live feeds from the Kepler system. Dominion ships fleeing in disorder, human vessels reconfiguring in the middle of combat, lightning arcing impossibly between warships. Every new update drove the chamber into fresh chaos. Speaker Vera's tentacles writhed so violently that droplets of fluid splashed onto the table. Impossible. These reports are fabricated. Humanity does not possess this level of technology. Fabricated? War Chief Arvex snapped, his golden feathers raised. I have commanders reporting it firsthand. Dominion fleets are in retreat. And those ships, they bear Earth's identification codes. The Zephyrian delegate flickered her crystalline body to a dull gray, a sign of dread among her kind. If this is true, then humanity has been hiding weapons that violate fundamental physics. Dimensional phasing? Adaptive hulls? Temporal kinetics? No species has ever achieved this. All eyes turned toward Nora. She rose slowly, letting the silence sharpen before she spoke. You asked for Earth's help. We delivered. The uproar resumed, louder than before. Delivered? Vera hissed, her voice trembling with outrage. You have deceived us for 3 years, pretending to be primitive, while secretly constructing the most dangerous fleet the galaxy has ever seen. Nora kept her expression composed, though her pulse thudded. We weren't pretending to be primitive. We simply didn't advertise everything we were capable of. There's a difference. Elder Theran, who had warned her after the last session, sat back in his chair, his stone-like features unreadable. His voice, however, rumbled with quiet weight. How long has humanity possessed these capabilities? Nora met his gaze. Some of the technology has been in development for decades. Others we refined after joining the Council, learning from the galaxy around us. The chamber froze at her admission. The implication was obvious. Humanity had studied them all, quietly, carefully, and then built weapons designed to counter them. War Chief Arvex's feathers lay flat against his body, the Avrian sign of suspicion. You mean to say that you have been observing our fleets, our defenses, our tactics, while we dismissed you as harmless? Observing, yes, Nora said evenly. To defend ourselves. To prepare for the threats we knew would come. The Dominion proved we were right. Her calmness only made the reaction harsher. Some delegates shouted for sanctions, others demanded answers, a few even whispered the word expulsion. The chamber swirled with fear disguised as outrage. Then Elder Theran raised one hand and the noise stilled. Ambassador Marcus, he said, his ancient voice cutting through the chaos, how many ships are we speaking of? The Kepler battle reports mention over 300 human vessels. That alone would be the largest fleet in Council history. Nora hesitated. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but saying it aloud carried a different weight. The fleets at Kepler represent roughly 1/4 of our total strength. The silence that followed was crushing. Not even the translators made a sound. Every eye in the chamber fixed on her, some wide with fear, others narrowing with suspicion. Finally, Speaker Vera spoke again, her tone low and venomous. If this is true, then humanity is now the dominant military power in the galaxy. What assurance do we have that you won't use this fleet to dictate terms to the rest of us? Nora let the question hang, then answered in a steady voice. If we wanted to dictate terms, we would have let the Dominion destroy you, then taken what remained. Instead, we revealed ourselves to save you. Murmurs rippled through the chamber again, this time quieter, heavier. It was a point no one could deny. Elder Theran leaned forward. Perhaps. But deception leaves scars. There will be consequences. Treaties, trade, trust, all must be reconsidered now. Nora gave a small nod. We expected as much. Humanity is ready to renegotiate. But understand this, we revealed ourselves now because hiding was no longer more important than helping. For a long moment, Theran studied her face. His eyes, old enough to have watched civilizations rise and fall, searched for a lie. At last he sat back. I believe you mean that, Ambassador. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy will. Nora held his gaze, but inside, her stomach tightened. She had seen the suspicion in the chamber. For all the Council's gratitude, humanity's future now balanced on a knife's edge. And if one thing was certain, it was this: the Dominion wasn't finished. 3 weeks after Kepler, the war was over. Not because the Dominion's fleets had been destroyed to the last ship, though many were gone. Not because their war machine had run out of resources, though it bled them faster than they expected. The war ended because the Dominion's leadership, a coalition that had never admitted weakness in its history, requested a meeting under the banner of surrender. The galaxy had no precedent for this. On board the Atlas, humanity's titanic flagship, Admiral Nathaniel Brooks stood in a conference hall larger than most planetary capitals. The walls gleamed with adaptive alloys, the lighting a soft white meant to calm nerves. Through the wide observation panels, The combined fleets of the Council, humanity, and the Dominion's surviving ships hung in tense formation. Weapons powered down, shields lowered, but tension thrumming through every hull. At one end of the table sat the familiar faces of the Council leadership. Elder Theron's stone-like skin looked more weathered than ever, Speaker Vera's tentacles shifted with nervous agitation, and Warchief Arvek's golden eyes stayed fixed on the far end of the chamber. There, for the first time, sat the Dominion's supreme war leader, General Karath, his scaled frame rigid but his eyes betraying unease. Beside him was Sub-Commander Drevik, scarred from the Kepler battle, his posture less defiant than Nora Marcus remembered from intercepted recordings. Nora sat between the two factions, her hands folded, her face calm. But inside she knew the stakes. Humanity had revealed its strength. Now came the harder task, proving it wouldn't use that strength to dominate. Karath broke the silence first, his voice deep and harsh. The Dominion formally ceases all military operations against Council worlds. We will withdraw to pre-war borders. His words echoed in the chamber. For the Dominion, it was an admission of failure greater than any battlefield defeat. Nora leaned forward slightly. And reparations for the colonies you destroyed? Drevik's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Resources will be redirected to rebuilding efforts. Mining fleets already await orders. Arvek ruffled his feathers, disbelief in his voice. Remarkably generous for a surrender. Most wars in our history ended with harsher terms. Slavery. Annexation. Entire species erased. Brooks, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice carried like steel wrapped in calm. Humanity believes it's more valuable to turn enemies into allies than corpses. The Dominion are warriors. We'd rather fight alongside them than against them. The words drew ripples across the table. Council representatives exchanged startled looks. The Dominion delegation looked equally stunned, their eyes darting between Brooks and Marcus as if searching for the trap. Karath narrowed his gaze. You offer leniency. What? So you can parade us as trophies? Nora shook her head. No. Because what's coming will make us need each other. She activated a control, and a new holographic map filled the chamber. Red clusters blinked along the galaxy's edge. The Void Hunters. The Machine Collective. The Swarm. 3 other forces, each with the potential to make the Dominion look small. Intelligence suggests they're already moving. The chamber grew heavy with silence. Elder Theron studied the map with grim recognition. I've seen the signs. Expansionist movements. Old enemies stirring. It fits. Nora continued. Humanity has technology. The Council has diplomacy and trade. The Dominion has unmatched military discipline. Separate, we all bleed eventually. Together, we stand a chance. Sub-Commander Drevik broke the silence with a dry laugh that sounded more like a cough. You're offering us a way to keep our honor. Fight for something other than conquest. That's new. Karatha's eyes burned with suspicion, but also something else, curiosity. You would have us stand with you. After we slaughtered your allies? Brooks met his gaze without flinching. Yes. Because the alternative is watching you try again in 10 years, and we'd rather not waste the bullets. The bluntness earned a flicker of dry amusement even from the war leader. Speaker Vera, however, hissed in agitation. This is madness. Giving the Dominion a seat in a defensive alliance? How can we trust them? Trust is never certain, Nora said. But consider this. If humanity wanted domination, we wouldn't be sitting at this table. We would have let the Dominion burn you, then conquered the ashes. Instead, we revealed ourselves by saving you. That was a choice. This is another. The room hung in silence, filled with the weight of possibility. Finally, Karath leaned forward, his voice low. Very well. The Dominion will accept these terms. But know this, Ambassador, if your species ever uses this alliance to shackle us, we will not bow quietly. Nora held his gaze, her own voice just as firm. And if you ever betray this alliance, Admiral Brooks' fleet won't give you a second chance. Do we understand each other? Karatha's lips pulled into something that might have been the Dominion version of a smile. We do. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion signed surrender papers. And for the first time ever, they signed an agreement of cooperation. The galaxy had just shifted on its axis. But as Nora looked at the holographic map of distant threats, she knew the true test hadn't even begun. Weeks after the Dominion's surrender, the galaxy still hadn't caught its breath. On every world, from the bustling trade hubs of the Council core to the quiet mining colonies along the rim, the same questions echoed. How long had the humans been hiding their power? Why had they stayed quiet? And what did they truly want? Ambassador Nora Marcus heard those questions everywhere she went. In private meetings, in council sessions, in the way alien representatives stared at her a moment too long. She answered with the same calm she had held on the day of the reveal. Humanity wanted peace, trade, cooperation. And now, everyone knew they had the teeth to defend those ideals. But beneath the surface, Nora felt the tension like a taut wire. Some allies were grateful, relieved that Earth had saved them from the Dominion. Others watched with unease, whispering that the galaxy had traded one conqueror for another. Trust would not come easily. On the Atlas, Admiral Nathaniel Brooks stood on the observation deck, hands clasped behind him, watching the fleets outside. For the first time in history, Dominion warships floated side by side with Council cruisers and human vessels. Training exercises rippled across the system as crews tried, awkwardly, to learn how to fight together. Captain Sarah O'Connell's voice carried over the comms with her usual dry humor. "We're running joint drills, Admiral. The Dominion ships are trying to follow our formations, but I swear they fly like drunks at a wedding. Suggest we issue them driver's ed manuals before the next war." Brooks allowed himself a faint smile. "Let them stumble. Better they make mistakes here than out there." Commander Gene Takeda chimed in from the Wraith. "They're learning. Slowly. But you can see it, they're watching us, copying, trying to understand how we fight. They've never seen an enemy move like we do." "Not enemies anymore," Brooks reminded him. "Partners. Or at least that's the plan." Takeda's voice was quiet for a beat. "Let's hope the plan holds." Out in the galaxy, signs suggested it might not. Trade agreements had to be rewritten now that humanity was no longer the junior partner. Diplomatic protocols were unraveling under the weight of fear and jealousy. Some species were already lobbying to limit humanity's military deployments, arguing no single member should carry such strength. Others whispered that the only reason Earth revealed its fleets was because it had ambitions bigger than peace. Nora faced those whispers in the council chamber every day. And every day she reminded them of the simple truth: humanity had saved them when it mattered. But even she knew that truth alone might not be enough. The warning came 3 months later. The chamber lights dimmed as an emergency transmission filled the room. Representative Corfax of the Mining Guild appeared, his expression grim. Outer Rim monitoring stations report massive ship movements from Void Hunter space. Their fleets are mobilizing and trade routes are already under attack. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates panicked. Others demanded immediate intervention. A few insisted it was too soon to test the fragile new alliance. Nora didn't move. She kept her gaze fixed on the holographic map now glowing with red indicators along the rim. This was it. The proof of everything she and Brooks had warned them about. The Dominion had been only the first storm. She rose, her voice clear over the noise. "We have an alliance. Let's use it. Humanity will deploy its fleets. The Dominion will provide battle experience. The Council will coordinate evacuations and diplomacy. Together we can stop the Hunters before they reach the core." All eyes turned to the Dominion delegation. General Karatha's scaled face was unreadable for a long moment. Then he stood, his voice carrying like a drum. "The Dominion honors its word. Our fleets are ready to fight, not for conquest but for survival. For the Alliance." Shock rippled across the chamber, but the tone had shifted. Suspicion gave way to urgency. For the first time, enemies of yesterday stood ready to fight side by side. On the Atlas, Brooks received the order for deployment. Engines rumbled. Weapons hummed alive. Across human space, hidden fleets prepared once more to reveal themselves. As the flagship shifted into motion, Brooks stood tall, eyes locked on the stars. "All ships, prepare for jump. The galaxy still doesn't understand us. That's fine. They'll learn." Nora Marcus, watching from the council chamber as reports streamed in, allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever, and the galaxy would never see them as weak again. But as the first Void Hunter fleets moved like shadows across the rim, one truth became clear. The war for survival had only just begun.